Chapter 1. The Reluctant Bride. The deep chime of the grand clock inside the Whitmore estate rang through the marble-floored halls, each slow, deliberate toll marking the beginning of something she had never wanted. Up on the highest floor, in a lavish dressing room fit for royalty, Eleanor Whitmore stood before an enormous gilded mirror, staring at the woman she barely recognized. The wedding gown, crafted by some world-famous designer whose name she couldn't care less about, clung to her like a second skin, its intricate lace and shimmering crystals catching the golden glow of the chandelier above. Her chestnut hair was swept into a flawless updo, a few soft strands framing her face, while her expertly applied makeup enhanced every delicate feature. To anyone else, she looked like a vision of elegance, the perfect bride. But in Eleanor's eyes, all she saw was a prisoner. The brightness she once had as a little girl was gone, replaced by something heavy, something suffocating. The silence in the room was thick, pressing in on her like an invisible weight. She exhaled, the sound unervingly loud in the stillness. Taking a step back, the heels of her designer stilettos tapped lightly against the polished floor, the sound crisp and precise. Around her neck, the Whitmore family's heirloom diamond necklace glittered, a relic of tradition, a symbol of status, and a shackle locking her into this marriage. Family honor. Eleanor, her father, William Whitmore, had reminded her just the night before. If you don't go through with this, everything your mother and I built will be gone. She had swallowed back her resentment, the lump in her throat growing tighter. Her mother, Vivian Whitmore, a woman who had never let anyone dictate her life, would have never stood for this. But Vivian had been gone for 3 years, her life cut short in a car crash that had left more questions than answers. And now, Eleanor was left to carry the burden alone. "I'm not some pawn to be traded away, father," she had told him, her voice trembling but firm. But William had merely turned his back to her, his expression unreadable, his concern for their family's wealth far outweighing any fatherly love he might have once had. She knew then there was no changing his mind, but she could change her own fate. For weeks, she had planned for this. Every detail, every step, and tonight, she would not be walking down that aisle. She would be walking out of this house, leaving behind the suffocating expectations, the cold demands, and the man waiting for her at the altar. Her eyes flicked toward the antique clock on the wall. Less than an hour before she was meant to say vows she didn't mean, standing beside Maxwell Sterling, a man old enough to be her father, with a smile that never reached his eyes and hands that lingered far too long. No! Her fists clenched. She would not let them decide her life for her. Lowering herself to the floor, Eleanor reached beneath the ornate vanity and pulled out a small, unassuming box. Inside were the essentials: a pair of plain flats, a burner phone, and enough cash to get far, far away. She had even discovered an old hidden passageway behind the room, one that led straight to the garden, a perfect escape route. Taking a deep breath, she adjusted the layers of her dress to conceal her supplies. This was it. One last glance at her reflection, this time, not to admire or critique, but to remind herself of one simple truth. She was not some fragile, helpless doll to be paraded around. She was stronger than that. As footsteps echoed in the hall, signaling the arrival of her attendants, Eleanor closed her eyes and whispered to herself, "This is my last chance." Chapter 2. The Kiss of Fate. The night air carried the sweet scent of roses from the sprawling gardens of the Whitmore estate, but Eleanor had no time to notice. Her bare feet, now in simple flats, moved swiftly across the gravel path as she kept to the shadows, avoiding the glare of the estate's massive floodlights. She was so close. "Just a little further," she murmured, gripping the hem of her gown as she hurried forward. The small gate at the edge of the property was just ahead. One more turn, and she would be gone. Then, footsteps. "Search the grounds." She couldn't have gone far. The gruff voice of a guard cut through the night, much closer than she had hoped. Eleanor froze, her heart hammering. She ducked behind a dense hedge, pressing herself against the cool leaves. Stay calm, stay hidden. But plans never go perfectly, do they? As she shifted ever so slightly, the harsh beam of a flashlight landed right on her. "Who's there?" a deep, authoritative voice demanded. She spun around, momentarily blinded by the light, and found herself staring at a tall man in a security uniform. He was different from the other guards, something about the way he carried himself, the way his sharp eyes seemed to assess her in an instant. The name tag on his chest read Marcus Kane. She stammered, panic rising in her throat. The sound of more approaching footsteps jolted her into action. She had seconds, maybe less, before they reached her. And so, without thinking, without hesitation, she grabbed Marcus by the collar and crashed her lips against his. The world seemed to stop. Marcus stiffened, caught completely off guard, but he didn't pull away. His eyes, sharp and intelligent, flickered with realization. He wasn't stunned by the kiss, no, it was something else. He understood. The footsteps grew closer. Then, in a deliberate move, Marcus let his flashlight fall to the ground and placed his hands lightly on Eleanor's shoulders, as if playing along. "What's going on here?" Another guard appeared, suspicion heavy in his voice. Marcus barely flinched. His voice was steady, calm, utterly convincing. "Nothing to report," he said smoothly. "Just a nervous bride getting some air before the big moment." The guard hesitated, eyes narrowing. Then, after a moment's pause, he gave a slow nod and moved on. As soon as he was gone, Eleanor stepped back, her face burning with embarrassment. I'm sorry," she stammered. "I didn't know what else to do. Please don't tell them." Marcus studied her, his gaze unreadable, calculating. Then, after what felt like an eternity, the corner of his mouth lifted just slightly. "Follow me," he said. "I know a better way out." Eleanor blinked. "Are you serious?" "Wouldn't have said it if I wasn't," he replied with a quiet smirk. She hesitated for only a second. There was no time for doubts. And so, trusting a man she had just met, Eleanor followed Marcus down a narrow, hidden pathway she had never noticed before, one he moved through as if he had known it all his life. Chapter 3. The Escape. Eleanor didn't have time for questions. Marcus led her to a small, concealed gate, nearly swallowed by the thick ivy clinging to the estate's walls. With a practiced motion, he reached for a hidden lever. A soft click sounded, and the gate creaked open, revealing a dark passage beyond. "Go," he urged. Eleanor hesitated, glancing back toward the estate, her pulse hammering in her ears. She had done it. She had actually run away from her own wedding. But what now? Where would she go? What was her plan? Marcus must have caught the hesitation in her eyes because his expression hardened. "Don't thank me yet," he said. "Do you even know where you're going?" Her mouth opened, but no words came, because truthfully she didn't. "I just know I can't stay here," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Marcus exhaled sharply, running a hand through his dark hair. For a moment he just studied her, his gaze unreadable. Then, with a resigned sigh, he nodded. "Fine," he said. "But first, you need somewhere safe to lay low. Come on." Eleanor barely had time to process his words before he took off, moving with the kind of confidence that suggested this wasn't his first time helping someone disappear. What she didn't know, what she couldn't have possibly guessed, was that Marcus Kane wasn't just some estate security guard. He was the CEO of Kane Industries, one of the most powerful tech conglomerates in the country. Undercover at the Whitmore estate, he had been gathering intelligence on Maxwell Sterling, her would-be husband, a man whose corporate empire was built on corruption, blackmail, and quiet disappearances. And now, thanks to one impulsive kiss from a desperate bride, his carefully constructed mission had just taken a sharp, unexpected turn. "This girl," Marcus muttered under his breath as they disappeared into the night. He had no idea just how complicated things were about to get, but something in his gut told him that, whether he liked it or not, he was already too deep to walk away. Chapter 4. A City on Edge. The glow of the streetlights reflected off rain-slicked pavement as Eleanor clutched the oversized coat Marcus had given her. It did little to ease the shivers racing through her, not from cold, but from the fear that any moment the search parties would close in. They had made it out of the Whitmore estate. But for how long? "Turn right," Marcus murmured, nodding toward a narrow alley. She didn't question him. They moved quickly, slipping between the darkened buildings like shadows. Behind them, the distant growl of engines signaled that the search was still ongoing. Then, headlights swept across the street just ahead. Marcus reacted instantly, yanking Eleanor into a tight space between two buildings. She pressed against the cool brick, barely breathing as the patrol car rolled past. "What now?" she whispered, her voice trembling but steady. Instead of answering, Marcus pulled a small, sleek device from his pocket. The screen flickered to life, showing a digital map of the city, complete with blinking red dots. Eleanor stared. "What is that?" "Something from Kane Industries," he replied, fingers moving expertly over the controls. "It was designed for monitoring urban security systems, but it has other uses. A tracking device. A high-tech one, at that." Eleanor barely had time to absorb this revelation before Marcus grabbed her wrist. "Come on." They hurried toward an old, run-down storefront. The wooden sign above the door had long since faded, and the glass windows were covered in grime. Marcus pushed the door open, the hinges creaking in protest. "Inside," he said, his voice low but firm. Eleanor stepped in, her nose immediately catching the scent of aged wood and dust. The shop looked abandoned, but Marcus didn't stop at the counter. Instead, he pulled back a heavy curtain at the far end, revealing a hidden doorway. "What is this?" Eleanor asked, eyes narrowing. Marcus glanced over his shoulder. "One of my safe houses." Her breath caught. "Who the hell are you?" A smirk ghosted across his lips. "The person you desperately need right now." With no other choice, Eleanor followed him inside. Chapter 5. The Truth in Shadows. The room was small but well-equipped. Surveillance monitors lined one wall, each screen showing different angles of the city streets. Eleanor stepped closer, her stomach knotting as she spotted a group of guards sweeping through the area. Their flashlights sliced through the darkness like knives. "They're still looking for us," she murmured. "Can we really get away?" Marcus tapped a few commands into a nearby keyboard. "They won't find us here," he assured her. "But we can't stay long. We need to keep moving." Eleanor nodded, forcing herself to push down the rising panic. A few moments later, Marcus handed her a cup of coffee, the rich aroma filling the small space. "You want to tell me why you ran?" he asked, his voice softer now, more curious than commanding. She hesitated, staring down at the steaming liquid in her hands. "It's not just the money," she finally said. "Maxwell Sterling, he's dangerous. He's ruined people, destroyed companies. And I think he had something to do with my mother's death." Marcus' expression darkened. "Are you sure?" Eleanor exhaled shakily. "Before she died, she found something about one of his deals. She told me she needed to act fast. But before she could," she swallowed hard. "The accident happened." Marcus was silent for a moment, studying her with an intensity that sent a shiver down her spine. "You're not wrong," he finally said. "Sterling isn't just a corrupt businessman. He's far more dangerous than you realize." Eleanor's eyes snapped up to his. "How do you know that?" His smirk returned, this time tinged with something colder. "Let's just say I have my own reasons for wanting to take him down. But I can't tell you everything. Not yet. You'll have to trust me." She watched him, trying to read the truth in his face. For some reason she couldn't explain, she did. "So what now?" she asked, her voice steadier than before. Marcus' eyes gleamed with purpose. "Now, we find somewhere safer, and then we start figuring out how to bring Sterling down." A strange sense of calm settled over her. For the first time in years, she wasn't alone. Outside, the city pulsed with life, search teams still scouring the streets for the runaway bride. But inside that small, hidden room, something new had begun to form. Une alliance, a flicker of trust, and perhaps the first spark of something neither of them had been prepared for. Chapter 6. Unmasking the Truth. Marcus watched Eleanor carefully as he set a steaming cup of coffee in front of her. His face remained calm, but his sharp blue eyes told another story. He was already planning his next move. She wrapped her hands around the mug, trying to steady herself. She had a feeling that whatever came next would change everything. Marcus flipped open his laptop and turned it toward her. The cold glow of the screen illuminated his serious expression. For a moment, the room was silent, except for the quiet hum of the computer. Then, finally, he spoke. "I think it's time you knew the truth." Eleanor's stomach tightened. The truth? She wasn't sure she was ready for it, but she also knew there was no turning back. On the screen, a series of charts, financial statements, and corporate records appeared. "Maxwell Sterling doesn't just want to marry you to save your family's company," Marcus began. "His plans go far beyond that. This isn't just another business acquisition. It's part of a much larger operation." Eleanor frowned, her grip tightening around the coffee cup. "What do you mean?" Marcus pointed to a document on the screen. It listed the names of dozens of companies Sterling had acquired over the last decade. He's been using shell companies and offshore accounts to quietly buy up firms specializing in artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, and biomedical research. On the surface, it looks like simple investments. But in reality, he's consolidating power in some of the world's most dangerous fields. Eleanor leaned forward, her eyes scanning the data. The deeper she looked, the more the pieces started falling into place. But why? What does he want with all this technology? Marcus hesitated before answering, his expression darkening. To partner with Angela Chun. The name sent a chill down Eleanor's spine. Angela Chun, the infamous pharmaceutical tycoon. A genius in medical research, yes, but also a woman whose name had been whispered in connection with scandal, corruption, and rumors that never quite reached the light of day. Angela Chun? Eleanor repeated, skepticism in her voice. I thought she was just a brilliant scientist and entrepreneur. Marcus let out a humorless chuckle. Brilliant? Yes, but also incredibly dangerous. He pulled up another file, this one containing leaked emails and confidential reports. Sterling and Chun have been collaborating on something far worse than business deals. They're developing a bioweapons program, disguised as medical research. Eleanor's blood ran cold. What? They're engineering artificial diseases and selling the cures at astronomical prices. But it doesn't stop there. These bioweapons can be used to manipulate economies, control governments, even eliminate threats. Eleanor stared at the screen, her heartbeat pounding in her ears. The documents laid it all out: confidential transactions, secret research facilities, human testing in developing nations. It was monstrous. How far along are they? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Marcus shook his head. I don't know for sure. But if your marriage to Sterling goes through, he'll gain full access to Silverstone Industries' technological infrastructure. That's the final piece he needs to complete the project. A wave of anger surged through Eleanor. I can't let that happen, she said firmly. But what can we do? Sterling has power, money, and an entire network behind him. Marcus reached into his pocket and placed a small external hard drive on the table. We're not powerless, he said. This drive contains everything I've gathered on Sterling's operations. But I need your help to analyze it. Eleanor met his gaze, determination burning in her chest. I know a bit about financial analysis, she said. My mother taught me how to spot fraudulent transactions and hidden accounts. Marcus smiled slightly. Then let's get to work. For hours, they pored over the data. Marcus provided advanced software tools, while Eleanor combed through the numbers with precision. Slowly but surely, the full scope of the conspiracy came into focus. Look at this, Eleanor said, pointing at the screen. A Swiss corporation is being used to launder money, which is then funneled into Chin's private research labs. Marcus nodded. And here, he added, pulling up another chart, funds from Silverstone Industries are already being allocated to their global expansion. If we don't stop this, it's only a matter of time before they go operational. The deeper they dug, the worse it got. Human testing. Entire villages wiped out by mysterious outbreaks. Governments quietly paying off Sterling and Chun to control the spread of engineered diseases. Eleanor's hands curled into fists. We have to stop them, she said. Not just for my family, but for everyone. Marcus studied her for a long moment before finally saying, You're not just brave, Eleanor. You're brilliant. Something passed between them then, an unspoken understanding. Two people from completely different worlds, now bound together by a dangerous purpose. Neither said another word. Outside, the city's skyline glittered, beautiful but deceptive, because beneath its lights, shadows loomed. And somewhere in those shadows, Maxwell Sterling and Angela Chun were already preparing their next. Chapter 7. A Flight into Danger. The jet sliced through the dark sky, leaving the city lights behind. Eleanor sat by the window, her gaze locked on the endless stretch of clouds illuminated by the moon. The weight of their discoveries pressed against her, heavy and suffocating. This is going to be a long journey, Marcus said from across the cabin. She turned to him, forcing a tired smirk. You think? He leaned back in his seat, crossing his arms. We've got about 8 hours before we reach my base in Accra. Try to get some rest. Eleanor scoffed. Hard to sleep when you're being hunted by a global crime syndicate. Marcus nodded. I get it. But if we're going to take Sterling down, we need to be at our best. That means staying sharp, physically and mentally. For a brief moment, the flight was peaceful. And then the plane jolted violently. The cabin lights flickered. The pilot's voice crackled through the intercom. "We have an unidentified aircraft approaching from behind. It's closing in fast." Marcus was already on his feet, his entire demeanor shifting. "Stay here," he instructed firmly. "I need to check this out." Eleanor barely had time to respond before he disappeared toward the cockpit. She turned to the window, and what she saw made her stomach drop. Two small aircraft were gaining on them. At first glance, they looked like cargo planes, but she recognized the insignia immediately. Maxwell's fleet. This was no coincidence. Marcus returned a moment later, his face grim. "They won't shoot us down," he said. "They need the plane intact, but they'll try to force a landing." Eleanor gripped the armrest, her pulse hammering. "How do they find us so fast?" "Sterling has people watching your every move," Marcus said. "But don't worry, I've prepared for situations like this." Outside, the enemy planes inched closer. The fight had already begun. Chapter 8. Escape across the sands. The wheels of the jet screeched against the cracked asphalt as they made a rough emergency landing at an isolated airstrip in the middle of a barren desert. The aircraft shuddered to a stop, the heat waves from the sun distorting the air outside. At the far end of the runway, a matte-black armored vehicle idled, its reinforced steel gleaming under the relentless sun. "Get in," Marcus barked, shoving open the door and motioning for Eleanor to move. She scrambled inside, barely catching her breath before the distant roar of approaching engines sent a spike of fear through her chest. She turned back. A convoy of dust-covered SUVs was speeding toward them, kicking up massive clouds of sand in their way. "They caught up to us," she gasped. Marcus didn't hesitate. He gripped the wheel and floored the gas. "Buckle up, Eleanor. They're not taking us without a fight." The armored vehicle lurched forward, tearing across the rugged desert terrain. Marcus maneuvered skillfully, weaving between dunes and rock formations like a man who had done this before, many times. Eleanor clutched the seat as the vehicle swerved violently, barely missing a jagged outcrop. The convoy behind them was relentless, their headlights flashing like predatory eyes. "Do you know how to shoot?" Marcus asked, his voice steady despite the chaos. Eleanor hesitated. "Never tried." A small, amused smile flickered across his lips. "Well, there's a first time for everything." He reached into the console, retrieving a compact handgun. Without taking his eyes off the road, he pressed it into her trembling hands. "If they get too close, aim for their tires. You don't need to be a sharpshooter, just make them swerve." Eleanor's heart pounded, but she nodded. She had never imagined herself in a situation like this. But fear wasn't an option anymore. If she wanted to survive, she had to fight. She rolled down the window, the dry desert air whipping against her face. The lead SUV closed in, its occupants masked and armed. Taking a deep breath, Eleanor steadied the gun, aimed, and fired. The first shot missed, but the second struck true. The front tire of the SUV exploded, sending the vehicle skidding sideways before flipping violently into the sand. "Nice shot." Marcus smirked. Eleanor barely had time to process it before another SUV swerved up beside them. A masked man leaned out the window, raising an automatic rifle. Marcus jerked the wheel. Their armored vehicle slammed into the SUV's side, sending it careening into a deep ravine. The remaining pursuers hesitated, wary now, but it was too late for them. Marcus took advantage of their hesitation, veering sharply toward a narrow canyon. Within minutes, they had lost their attackers in the maze of rock and sand. The sun was rising when they finally pulled into the outskirts of Accra. Chapter 9. The Safe Haven. The moment Eleanor stepped out of the vehicle, she knew this was no ordinary safe house. Surrounded by towering security walls and state-of-the-art surveillance, Marcus's base was a fortress hidden in the heart of the city. Inside, a team of highly skilled technicians bustled around, working with an intensity that suggested they were at war. "Welcome to my operations hub," Marcus said, leading her through a sleek, high-tech laboratory filled with cutting-edge technology. "This is where we fight back." A young technician approached, handing Marcus a dossier. "We've analyzed the data from the hard drive," he reported. "Maxwell and Angela are preparing to test their new bioweapon in a vulnerable region of East Africa. If they succeed, they'll have proof of concept and global leverage." Eleanor's stomach twisted. "They're not just greedy," she murmured, rage simmering in her voice. "They're monsters." Marcus placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. His expression was serious, but reassuring. We'll stop them, but we need to be meticulous. This isn't just about exposing them. It's about making sure they can't recover. Eleanor met his gaze, seeing the same determination burning in his eyes. I won't back down, she said firmly. For days, Eleanor threw herself into the work. She wasn't just analyzing financial patterns anymore. She was unraveling the very foundation of Maxwell Sterling's empire. She quickly proved herself as more than just a financial analyst. She was relentless, sharp, and fearless. Marcus took notice. Their late-night strategy sessions turned into something deeper, long conversations about everything and nothing, moments of rare quiet amidst the storm they were preparing to unleash. One evening, as they sat on the balcony overlooking the city lights, Marcus leaned back against the railing, studying her. "You're not like anyone I've ever met in the corporate world," he said. Eleanor smirked. "And you're not like any security expert I've ever met." They both chuckled, but beneath the laughter, something lingered, an unspoken connection forged in the fire of their shared fight. The road ahead was treacherous, but at least they weren't walking it alone. Chapter 10. The Past Resurfaces. Marcus's base was more than a fortress. It was a vault of buried secrets. Eleanor stood in the main research lab, surrounded by walls of screens displaying streams of encrypted data. And then, her breath caught. On one of the screens, an old photograph appeared. Her mother, Catherine Silverstone. Beside her, a man she didn't recognize at first, until Marcus spoke. "That's my father, Thomas Ambrose." Eleanor turned to him, shock flashing across her face. "They work together?" Marcus nodded, his voice quieter than usual. For 4 years, they developed a revolutionary gene therapy, a cure for diseases no one thought could be cured. Eleanor stared at the image. Her mother's smile was radiant, filled with the determination she had always admired. "She never told me," Eleanor whispered. "She mentioned biotechnology research, but never this." Marcus exhaled, his jaw tightening. They kept it secret for a reason. They knew the pharmaceutical industry would come for them. And they were right. Maxwell Sterling and Angela Chun led the charge to destroy everything. A young technician entered, carrying a hard drive. "We recovered this from Silverstone Industries' old servers. It has all the research your mother and my father conducted, including the final test results." Eleanor's hands trembled as she flipped through the documents. She wasn't a medical expert, but even she understood the magnitude of what she was holding. This therapy, it could have saved millions. Exactly. Marcus's voice hardened. That's why Maxwell and Angela destroyed it. He pointed to another image, a photograph of a burnt-down laboratory. "They staged this explosion as an accident, but in reality, they killed my father and your mother, and they erased every trace of their work." Eleanor clenched her fists, her body trembling with fury. "They didn't just murder our parents," she said through gritted teeth. "They stole hope from the world." Marcus placed a firm hand on her shoulder. "We can still make this right, but we have to act fast." In the base's war room, Marcus's team gathered. "Maxwell and Angela are about to announce a medical breakthrough at a global press conference," Marcus explained. "In reality, it's a bioweapon disguised as a treatment. If they succeed, they'll hold the world hostage." Eleanor's brow furrowed. "Then we use their own stage against them." She turned to the team. "We need global attention, not just through mainstream media, but through social platforms. We have to make the truth impossible to ignore." Marcus nodded. "We expose them before the press conference ends." The battle had begun, and this time, Maxwell Sterling and Angela Chin wouldn't see it coming. Chapter 11. A New Dawn. Marcus's gaze softened, yet his resolve remained unshaken. "We both lost so much," he murmured, "but that's what makes us stronger. And together, we'll finish what our parents started." Eleanor turned to him, feeling something she hadn't in a long time: safety. "I trust you, Marcus, and I'm ready to face whatever comes, as long as you're with me." Their eyes met, and in that moment, it wasn't just about revenge or justice. Beneath the battle scars, a deeper truth was taking root, a belief that even in the face of darkness, love and truth could still win. Chapter 12. The Final Battle. The Grand Hall of Silverstone Industries was a glittering spectacle, a cathedral of wealth and power. The world's most influential figures, investors, media moguls, and corporate elites, filled the room, buzzing with anticipation. At the center of it all, A massive screen displayed the logos of Silverstone Industries and Sterling Global, the final confirmation of the impending merger. Then, Maxwell Sterling took the stage. His steps were measured, his expression the perfect mask of confidence. He adjusted his tie, flashing his signature politician smile. Ladies and gentlemen, today marks a historic milestone, not just for Silverstone Industries, but for the future of medical innovation. This partnership will usher in a new era of prosperity. The lights flickered. The screen behind him glitched. Then suddenly it changed, gone were the corporate logos. In their place appeared the image of a woman, her piercing eyes staring directly into the soul of the room. Catherine Silverstone. Hello, Maxwell. Her voice echoed through the hall, crisp and unyielding. Though it was only a recording, it sent a shockwave through the crowd. If you're hearing this, it means your lies have finally caught up to you. Maxwell's smile faltered. His knuckles whitened as he gripped the podium. The room stirred, whispers spreading like wildfire. And then, the screen filled with documents, images, and videos. Irrefutable proof of Maxwell and Angela's crimes. Clips showed Angela overseeing illegal experiments. Spreadsheets exposed the secret transactions funding bioweapon development. Emails revealed Maxwell's calculated destruction of small businesses. And then, the doors of the hall burst open. Eleanor and Marcus strode inside, exuding unshakable confidence. She was dressed in a sleek white suit, elegant, commanding. He walked beside her in a sharp, dark suit, his presence radiating quiet authority. Every eye in the room turned to them. Eleanor stepped forward, her voice ringing through the silent hall. I think it's time we told the truth. Maxwell stiffened. Angela Chun, seated in the front row, shot daggers at. Marcus moved to the center, holding up a small device. He pressed a button. Every screen in the hall exploded with evidence. This is what you didn't want the world to see, Maxwell, Marcus announced. Your network of shell companies, your backdoor deals, and the bioweapon you and Angela designed under the guise of medical research. Maxwell let out a hollow laugh, straightening his posture. These allegations are baseless, he sneered. This is nothing more than the desperate act of a failed girl and an outsider. Eleanor didn't flinch. Really, Maxwell? She said coldly. These documents were pulled directly from your private servers. And this, she held up a hard drive, is proof that you ordered the explosion that killed my mother and Marcus's father. The hall erupted in gasps. Angela sprang to her feet. This is a fraud, she shrieked. They're trying to ruin us. But before she could move, the doors flew open again. A team of FBI agents strode in. Angela Chun. Maxwell Sterling, an agent called out. You are under arrest for financial fraud, sabotage, and crimes against humanity. Handcuffs clicked into place. Maxwell struggled, his composure crumbling. Angela screamed in rage, but it was over. The cameras flashed. Journalists whispered. Justice had arrived. Chapter 13, A Future Reclaimed. The crowd was still in shock when Eleanor stepped onto the stage. Her voice, steady and unwavering, carried through the hall. Today, we didn't just expose corruption. We reclaimed the future. We put an end to the greed that would have cost countless lives. She looked out at the sea of faces, shareholders, employees, the very people who had been deceived. This isn't just about the fall of Maxwell Sterling. This is about building something better, something true. Beside her, Marcus nodded. We will carry forward the legacy of Catherine Silverstone and Thomas Ambrose, he declared. Technology and medicine should serve humanity, not line the pockets of the powerful. Thunderous applause filled the hall. Eleanor had not only reclaimed Silverstone Industries, she had restored its honor. As they stepped out into the golden glow of the evening sun, Eleanor turned to Marcus, her eyes shining with quiet triumph. We did it. Marcus took her hand. We didn't just save a company, he murmured. We saved ourselves. They stood together, watching the city before them. The battle was won, but their work was just beginning. Chapter 14, Happiness Rediscovered. 1 year later, in the sprawling gardens of Silverstone Manor, something remarkable had happened. Catherine Silverstone's black roses, once a symbol of loss and mystery, were in full bloom. Now, they were a testament to hope, rebirth, and love. Eleanor stood before an antique mirror, the weight of history and the future draped across her shoulders. She wore a pristine white gown, hand-stitched with delicate black rose embellishments, a tribute to the mother she had fought so hard to honor. In her hands, she held a bouquet of black roses, carefully selected by Marcus himself. The past had been reclaimed. The future had been rewritten. And as she stepped forward, walking toward the next chapter of her life, she knew this was just the beginning. Epilogue, a love forged in fire. As Eleanor gazed at her reflection, a radiant smile spread across her face, her eyes shimmering with a joy she never thought she'd feel. She was no longer the girl trapped in a loveless marriage with Maxwell. She was no longer a pawn in someone else's game. Today, she stood as a free woman, a strong woman, a woman stepping confidently into a new life with a man she truly loved. Outside, the black rose garden had been transformed into something out of a dream. Thousands of twinkling lights wove through the trees, casting a warm, magical glow over the guests who had gathered to witness this moment. At the heart of the garden, Marcus waited. He wore a sleek black suit, accented with a traditional Ghanaian Kent scarf, a perfect tribute to both his roots and the future they were about to build together. When he saw Eleanor approaching, his chest tightened. Pride, love, a sense of destiny fulfilled. It was all there in his eyes. Beside her, James walked with steady steps, his arm linked with hers. His voice, thick with emotion, barely rose above a whisper. My daughter, your mother would be so proud of you today. You've done what neither she nor I could. Eleanor's fingers curled around his hand, her touch gentle, reassuring. I had both of you guiding me, she murmured, her voice soft but certain. And now, I have Marcus by my side. As they reached the altar, Eleanor and Marcus faced each other, hands intertwined beneath the glow of the lights. The priest began the ceremony, but it was their vows, spoken from the heart, that truly moved everyone to tears. Marcus took a deep breath, his deep, steady voice carrying through the still night air. Eleanor, a year ago, you crashed into my life like a storm, turning everything I thought I knew upside down. But through you, I learned that the best things in life aren't planned. They just happen. I vow to stand by you, not just in moments of joy, but through every storm. Together, we will build a future that is bigger than us, bigger than our pasts. Eleanor's eyes glistened as she spoke. Marcus, you taught me that love isn't about being bound. It's about freedom. Freedom to trust, to love, to face whatever comes side by side. I promise to stand by you, not just as your partner, but as your equal, your confidant, and your home. As they exchanged rings, the light caught the rubies embedded within them, symbols of fire, resilience, and a love that had been tested but never broken. A celebration of two worlds. The reception that followed was a breathtaking blend of past and future, legacy and renewal. Tables were adorned with black and gold roses, a tribute to the Silverstone and Ambrose families. The menu was a perfect harmony of Western elegance and African tradition, a reflection of two cultures that had not only merged, but thrived together. Laughter and music filled the night air, but the most powerful moment came when James, now healthy, thanks to the very medical technology Catherine had fought so hard to protect, stood to give his toast. Eleanor, Marcus, you didn't just fight for our family, you fought for the future. You stood against greed, against injustice. And in doing so, you've created something truly extraordinary. We are so proud of you. As his glass was raised, the garden erupted with applause, cheers ringing into the night. A quiet moment, long after the guests had gone. When the music had faded and the celebration had ended, Eleanor and Marcus found themselves standing in the garden of black roses once more. A gentle breeze rustled the petals, carrying with it the presence of those they had lost. Eleanor sighed, leaning her head against Marcus's shoulder. We did it, she whispered. Marcus squeezed her hand, his grip firm and unwavering. And this is only the beginning, he murmured. Our future won't just be about technology or justice. It'll be about using them to make the world better. Together, under the soft glow of the moonlight, they shared a slow, lingering kiss, a silent promise. To love, to fight, to build, together. And as they stood there, wrapped in the warmth of each other's arms, they knew their story was just beginning. Thank you for staying with us until the end. What did you think of Eleanor and Marcus's journey? Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more unforgettable tales of love, justice, and redemption.